Thank you, guys. It feels quite nice not to have to answer questions and to be asking them. But I thought I'll start in a light-hearted way and ask each of you to describe in one line yourself. So maybe we start with Moon.
Um, to keeping simple, everyone calls me Moon. I'm the moon on the Earth and not in the space.
Okay, all right.
Really, I'm an engineer by training, but a lot of people do not know I was hired as an engineer, but in my 33 years working, I never spent a day working as an engineer.
I see. I was told that you're a Star Wars fan.
I'm sure many of us are Star Wars fans here.
Well, I was told reliably that what you enjoyed about Star Wars was the ability for robots to make friends with humans. Is that right? So you're in exactly the right space now.
Well, we are probably hitting that envelope that this can happen.
Okay. How about you, Vaishli?
So I've just maybe one line about myself. I'd say constantly pushing boundaries. And I just happen to find myself in the lucky space of having chosen technology 30 years ago and having had a passion for AI when we called it advanced analytics 15 years ago.
Right.
So I think I got lucky in being in the right space at the right time.
I'm told that you were researching and involved in AI before people knew how to spell AI.
No, not quite that old either, Minister, but yes.
Quite there, yeah. Okay. Esther,
I'm a lawyer who has never used a paginator.
never used a paginator.
Yeah.
You're in a different generation.
Yes.
Just a fun fact for the audience knows, I used to be in a long case once upon a time with Esther. We were not on the same side, but we were in the same courtroom for many, many weeks. And I did the pagination.
That was post-paginator time.
Kamal?
Well, if you're a lawyer who hasn't used a paginator, I'm a law student who hasn't used the BlackBerry.
Kamal is still in law school, finishing soon. So I got to meet him some weeks ago. And I told that you are quite a tech geek.
I guess so. I mean, I'm interested in some areas here and there, but I don't think I can code too well to save my life.
You can't code 2 lines.
I can code a couple of lines, but I think if you put me in a room with a bunch of computer science students, you'll be able to find me quite easily.
So, do you feel as a young law student, youngest in the entire panel here, that we are all talking boomer talk?
I think it depends on what you define.
Be honest.
Okay. I guess if we're going there, I can definitely accept the fact that my experiences that I have are not on the level that you have at the moment. I think the only thing I spent the last 24 years doing is being alive. So clearly, I think there's a bit of a gulf there. But I'm learning here and there. I think as much as I'm here to share my views on Gen Z, it's also a front row seat for me to learn from the industry leaders here to try and figure out what's going on out there, especially because I'm at the stage where I'm looking over the precipice of graduating. So definitely there's a lot for me to hear, there's a lot for me to say as well.
Okay, and I hope you can share from your viewpoint the perspectives of a young law undergraduate about to come into the legal profession, a very important and a noble profession, but also your fears, your anxieties, but also what excites you about coming forward.
I hope to. Thank you for having me.
Before I go into the substance, one more question for each of you, and I'll start now with Kamal.
Goodness.
What is the one tech innovation today, happening today or maybe in the future, that really excites you?
That really excites me per se, I think the advance at which generative AI has moved on. So it's quite a blanket statement to say that generative AI is something that interests me, but I think if we look at the nitty-gritty, the things that it can do right now, when it comes to what it can do for education, what it can do for the day-to-day practices of the legal industry, as we've seen from the booths right behind, I think the fact that it's getting so smart so fast is something that's definitely a game changer when it comes to us as users. But at the same time, I think as people within the industry, it is also quite scary because if it can do so much, how much more can I do than it? And then at what point will it be better than me? I think if you were to put me and the latest version of Gemini against each other in a law school exam, I might walk out with a B or B minus. I don't know what Gemini is getting. And frankly, I'm scared for the bell curve.
Well, you can ask the person who knows Gemini well. How about you, Esther?
If
What
I-
really excites you, or what makes you nervous, what makes you anxious about tech development, since Google is one of those names that you might see right at the forefront of tech development?
Well, something that makes me extremely excited and very proud of is actually the product by Google DeepMind. It's AlphaFold. I do not know whether any of you have heard of it. It actually won the Nobel Prize, right? And in the spirit of Google, we also open it up to the world. And right now, we actually have 3 million researchers over 190 countries using it, trying to tackle things like malaria vaccines, to create new antibiotics, and it's been phenomenal. So that's really exciting.
Oh, that's good. That's a real game changer.
Yes.
Rashli?
So, when I heard that question, I was thinking, should we go further out in the horizon, talk about quantum, AGI, whatever. I thought I'd ground it in reality. I think over the last couple of months, I would encourage whoever has not heard the word harness engineering in AI to go Google it. And it's not a techie thing. If AI could earlier just enable code writing, harness engineering replaces all the code writers we have. So perhaps it's good you're not a computer engineering student, Kamal. And if you take that forward, just imagine how it can redo the entire agentic world of AI.
So it replaces all the coders.
Potential to replace all the
Oh dear.
coders.
Is there anything that you know of that replaces lawyers?
Not yet, so we have a chance to
Okay,
really...
so we have a
innovate.
chance still. We are still okay, all right. Moon?
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with Vishali that, Kamal said he's not good at coding. I think the reality is you don't need to know coding to do coding. That's the reality today,
Oh,
right? So the example that I gave in technology, I thought of bringing it back to what is available today. I just came back from Barcelona Mobile World Congress last night. And something I saw there was real and we should be proud of. And I'm going to put up the photo. I think there's only one slide which is photo. This is a exhibition at Barcelona by NUHS,
Right.
our own, one of our own. They were invited by the GSMA to showcase their technology in front of 100,000 visitors. It's the largest tech conference for telco every year in Barcelona. And what is so unique about this is using the latest technology, using our network, but using AI. So you see that doctor wearing that AR goggle there, he's actually wearing that goggle to do surgery. And we know when we go for our medical checkup, we do all the scans, right? Whether it's a CT scan or MRI or X-ray, there's always a record. And if in the unfortunate situation where you discover something, the surgeon will have to operate on you, right? And then they will go and do the operation. So what the technology allows us to do today is using the 5G network that they superimpose all your scan onto the cloud and they project it onto the doctor's
I see.
goggle. When they do the operation, they know exactly, precisely where to make that insertion to minimize the amount of centimeters that you have to cut.
So it's very precise.
Very precise, so that you recover better. So they have a lot of different surgeons now trained to use it, and it's actually helping patients to recover faster, doing the surgery more accurately. This is just one aspect of it. The other photo on the right, where you see there's a sort of a robot, that's really a robot nurse to actually in the hospital, moving around, tasked to go and deliver medication, chat with patient, and this is real.
I see.
This is not a pilot. This is actually happening at NUH. So if you are visiting the hospital, you can actually see the robots in action, the surgeons doing this. So it is actually something that is real today. You can say displacing some of the jobs of the nurses, but it's also an area that we don't have enough nurses. So it's actually a good thing. And the doctors are helping patients. So I think we should all be very proud that this is really cutting edge stuff with technology, with AI, is really helping people amongst us.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to dive into a couple of key questions that I think the audience will want to know about tech, AI, and adoption in the legal fraternity, legal industry. And I thought what I'll do is I will start with the broad, and then I will zoom in on some of the specific issues that arise, some from the comments I made earlier, and then I'll pick up on some of the questions that the audience have put into Pigeonhole. But I thought I'll start with a very broad topic. We have heard about people investing in AI. The spend has gone through the roof. We've talked about large law firms developing their own in-house and having supercharged capabilities. And we've also heard about how AI might, maybe in some point in the future, replace some of the younger lawyers and therefore their concerns and anxiety. Maybe we can try and find a way to rationalize that, unpack it a little bit for us. Can I start with you, Vashti?
Yeah, sure. So just a few points. So first is AI, in my mind, AI, whether you say Gen AI, predictive, agentic, is here to stay. It's a fundamental technology. But if you want to get, and if you look at the stats, we interviewed 640 CEOs in January this year, and 72% of them said it is their agenda. They will drive it. So you cannot outsource this and hope it will happen somehow bottom up. Of course, you have to upskill your people, but if leadership doesn't take charge of it, we will get nowhere. So that's point one. Point two, I would say, is we are not yet seeing ROI fully on it, but nobody is stopping the spend. Almost 80% of the folks we asked said that they're going to increase spend or keep it the same. Most people across industries are going to increase spend to about 2% of revenue. And maybe fourth and fifth points would be that technology is an enabler, but technology doesn't get you anywhere. If nothing else, 10, 20, 70. 10 is the technology, 20 is all the LLMs and algorithms, 70% is the change management. You have to reimagine a workflow, end to end. If you pick micro little things to do, you will get micro impact. So that would be just a few thoughts to get us started in terms of at least what I'm seeing.
I'm going to come back to you in a while on this, Vashti, because I understand that you are very uniquely placed to address this audience because in your professional capacity, you have been consulting with large firms, legal firms,
Yes.
about change management,
Yes.
about tech adoption,
Yes.
about what they ought to do.
Yes.
So I'll come back to you on those points. But maybe I'll ask Esther to make the same remarks on my earlier question.
I just want to remind everybody in this room that AI doesn't hold a practicing cert. I mean, you guys do, right? So it's not meant to replace you. But as was mentioned earlier, right, we're looking, as Google, we're looking at our law firms to start showing some internal velocity. You need to start demonstrating that you're having time saved per workflow, right? And if you're in the past, if you're going to spend a lot of time on researching and drafting, then we want to see you moving that away, using more AI to help you with that, and then concentrating on what we actually come to you for, which is your strategic legal advice. And that's what we're looking at.
Kamal, from your perspective as a young law student about to come into this world of lawyers and AI and technology and agentic AI and so on, what are some of your anxieties, if I can call it as such, or concerns as you begin to embark on a legal career that perhaps from your vantage point is filled with a lot of uncertainty, but also with a lot of opportunity?
Well, I think to just carry on from my initial statement about what I'm concerned about, I think a big thing to consider is what AI can do. And then from then you extrapolate what AI can't do. So from what I've seen, especially right now in law school and also on a couple of internships here and there, is that AI is getting very good at very mechanical stuff like drafting, stuff like summarizing of content. Truth be told, I do a lot of my case readings using Notebook LM. So a lot of these things are mechanical work to get general understanding of the law, and typically, as I've understood from a lot of my supervisors, are work that was traditionally given to junior practitioners. You know, you're told to read these 10 cases, extract the principles, draft an affidavit, or give me a sample email that you'll give out to a client based on these things. So on these mechanical areas, I think if this is the workflow that was given to a traditional associate or practice trainee per se, especially the latter because you don't have a PC yet, so you can't really represent a client just yet, I think that that is something that might end up going towards the AI agents itself. But then again, I think one thing that has stuck with me on one of my recent internships was when I did family law work at a small firm that does civil and Sharia matters. So the managing director said to me that he was concerned mostly for support staff, the paralegals who do drafting, client emails, and these areas. But when it comes to the actual lawyers themselves, especially in more sensitive person-to-person areas, for example, stuff like family law, you can't replace the lawyer because on one hand, yes, an AI bot can give you 5 cases, 10 legal positions, and tell you how to file like your next 2 documents. But to tell someone who's, say, a divorcing mother with 3 kids, or someone who's going through what might be a small claim, a small matter at, say, the state courts, but might be the entire world to them, you would need a lawyer there to empathize and to give you that human connection per se. So to consolidate the position and just to keep things on brand, I think there are mechanical tasks that AI might take over. These are things that were traditionally given to junior practitioners, especially when you look at practice trainees. But at the same time, the concern of needing a lawyer to be there for the client is something that I'm personally not too afraid of. I know that I want to go into areas of law that deal with person to person, or rather persons to other members of the community. And as long as you're going to need a voice and a face and someone to be there, then I think you will always need lawyers. So I'm not entirely, panicking about AI. I know that the workload will change. I know that the workflow will change, but there's still that essence of humanity that will still require a human lawyer. So that's where I stand on this issue.
That's a very good response, and one which I think I resonate with, because it's ultimately the empathy, the human compassion, the judgment, and in many ways the instinct and intuition that as a lawyer you have, and that's the value that you bring to the table. Would you say that that view that you just articulated is a pretty commonly held view amongst your peers?
I think just as a blanket statement, especially since I'm here probably as the only Gen Z person on the panel, is...
Hey, you're not that far away.
Not that far away, but the line is the line. I will say that Gen Z is a generation that you can't generalize per se. We are a generation that thinks different, acts different, and dreams different. Relative to other generations, definitely, but also within ourselves, within the members of the community. So I don't think that you can say that everyone will feel the same way. And I think that this is probably exemplified by the fact that not everyone wants to practice the same area of law. I think that if you're someone who wants to enter corporate law, and you know that the area that you want is a place that is probably flooded with contracts, stuff which are a bit more impersonal, so to speak. They do deal with people, but they're not necessarily dealing with the proverbial man on the street. I think that the concerns for those people who are entering those industries are probably different from someone who says wants to enter criminal defense, or someone who wants to enter family law, or other areas of like the legal service, for example. So the different concerns are tailored to what the tailored needs of that industry are. And I think if you wanted to generalize, and I'm really hesitant to generalize, I think the further away you get from people and individual humans, the more the panic meter tends to rise, I think.
Okay. Esther, so in your position as in Google as GC, do you find on occasion that instead of instructing external counsel, you can look it up on ChatGPT, Claude, or any range of these devices? I'm asking the question for most of you.
We don't use external tools.
Okay, well,
That's my short answer. But I think that's a
good answer.
That's an apt answer. That's an apt question, because I'm also seeing a lot of the questions popping up from the audience as well. And I think there needs to be a reframing of the mindset as well. Like pertaining to your question, Minister. It's about, your question about tools. Yes, we use the tools a lot And we do stop going to law firms for some stuff, for example, translation, right? As I've mentioned in a previous conference before, when you have a 300-page Vietnamese law, I can no longer wait for the law firm to translate it for me, right? I've tried using them before. They took about 4 to 6 weeks. I can't do that. So I upload it into our internal tool and get it translated. So yes, and I don't think as lawyers, when you go to law school, you want to go out into a law firm and be doing translation work, right? I don't think that's what you train yourself for. So this kind of low-value, administrative, repetitive task, we are using AI for that, right? But we are still going to our law firms for strategic advice. And somebody in the audience was asking me, why do I need strategic advice if I'm using internal tools? But as I said, the AI doesn't hold a PC, right? And you will also know as practitioners and law students that a lot of laws are not clear. And that's why you have litigation, that's why you have disputes, right? And we need that human, as you mentioned, the human in the loop, right? We need people who has that knowledge and be able to navigate the gray areas of laws. And for that, we come to the law firm for it.
Moon, can I turn to you now and ask you another question from the perspective, from the buy side, from the client side? What are your expectations on a counterparty, including lawyers whom you might instruct, on their use and adoption of AI? I mean, would you look at a firm differently if they had or they had not used AI in their work process?
Definitely, it will change. I think it's not just law firms or legal services that we are looking at. In fact, when you decide to engage any services externally, the first thing you're going to ask, is this company using any AI? Has it made that progress and that improvement? Because we know that if you use it, you will be a lot more efficient. So the first level is really about improvement in productivity, improvement in efficiency. That's given. And whoever who resists it, then I think you are old school, and fewer and fewer people will come to you. So I think that's the basic stuff. That's the stuff that is not, that we should definitely embrace.
Okay.
But it's not easy, but you have to. But the bigger challenge is actually disruption. And if I look at the legal profession, which I know nothing about, but the disruption will come from within. That means someone who really know the legal profession looking at using AI to disrupt the entire industry. And what is, I think, protecting that disruption, because we don't see a lot of big use cases coming up, is actually the rules itself.
The rules itself,
the rules in the profession.
Right.
Because how soon will the legal system embrace technology?
Well, you know, when I was a lawyer in practice, we used to have the technology court. Not many people used it. We tried very hard to have, I think Esther might remember, in the old High Court, we had a bar table, and we tried to put in the computer system, and there was a big screen, and you know, everyone was looking at the courts like it's a very high-tech court. But when we came in as counsel, we would fold the screen down, use it as a shelf to put your papers, and we will use the paper, you know, because it's such, lawyers and technology is just so like oil and water, right? It's hard to mix. And in fact, it really wasn't until COVID struck that lawyers then became more comfortable on Skype and Zoom and so on. So I think you're right. I think it needs someone to be that disruptor or the embracer of the disruption to be able to force that change.
So maybe pushing the envelope a little bit, Minister, when will the court allow a AI lawyer to be present?
I think
that's the way you push it.
That's a serious question. That's
Yes.
a very serious question. But today, I think we have made, it's gone leaps and bounds. I think the level of technology that the courts have used, both at front end and back end, the way they interact with counsel, the way filings are done, the way analysis is done, is a lot more embracing of technology now than it ever has been.
So which means, what I'm trying to say is that if we don't push the envelope, you'll never know. I give you another example which I come across recently. I was at an air show, So I visited one company who actually operates drone and using AI to operate drone. In fact, they have an AI agent we call the AI pilot. So they tell me that today, an AI pilot, if you go to one of the fighter jets today, you put in place, instead of a real pilot, he hands off and let the AI take over. 10 or 10 times, the AI pilot beats the human pilot. So the question is, when do we dare to let go?
Yeah,
And go back down to your point, trust. Because we don't trust the system, and because I think in the legal profession, trust is such a major thing.
absolutely.
So that's why we still need human lawyers, because of that trust element.
It's trust and a lot of what Kamal said earlier, that there's an interface that the human judgment and intuition can give you, which the AI is still not able to. And that is forged through many years of understanding the client, knowing the individual, knowing what are your business priorities. I mean, the AI might be able to analyze the outcome of a case, but sometimes, as you know, the process of getting through a case in court over many months with an outcome that might be successful ultimately, but the reputational and other consequences might well not be something that the client is looking for. And that's something that the individual lawyer can judge based on his or her own knowledge of the client and the internal business dynamics. Coming back to you, Bashli, Moon talked about him not knowing the legal industry so well, but I think in you we have someone who knows not just the legal industry, but the legal industry in the context of its change management in technology. So I thought perhaps you could share some of your experiences with you as you managed the changes in many firms, not just in Singapore, but around the world. And what were some of the easy bits that you were able to push on? But also, what were some of the friction points that you encountered as you tried to manage or negotiate the change management?
So first of all, full disclosure, most of my work in legal and AI is not here. It's with a couple of the top global firms in the top 10. So it may or may not apply in the Singapore context. But just to, maybe if I step back, if you think about it, you're right. We need, be it in any part, litigation, IP, M&A, corporate law, whatever, you do need judgment, you do need interpretation, you do need the empathy, you do need the trust, you do need the value add, you need all of that. But there's a small challenge which is called and many professional services have that challenge, which is, what does your pyramid look like going forward? And how do you train up the next generation of people? So that's one challenge, because perhaps the pyramid doesn't quite look the way it is. Second, a lot of professional services firms are built on billing. A private equity, we interviewed hundreds of clients of different legal firms, and one of the private equity guys who's a big user said, you know what, I expect a change in the time that it takes to process things. I think you mentioned translation, but also just time on task, speed of response, billing practices, etc. And so what does that mean in terms of how firms adapt? The third thing is that there are so many tools out there. How do you really make sure that you don't get a lock-in, but you need to start from the area. So if you're, I don't know, if you're looking at drafting or contract drafting and management and the whole life cycle management, you need to take a domain and really reimagine it end to end. Meaning, what can be an AI that helps you answer queries? What is it, the insight that you can produce? What is the drafting that can be done? And you have to break it up and then make sure that your domain knowledge fits into the tools as well. It's not just, you just plug and play and it works. And so I think there is, that's what I said, leadership matters. And to some degree, some amount of scale matters as well, because it's hard to reimagine this and do this all by yourself. So funding is important, but maybe some collaboration, some sharing, especially for the mid-size and smaller firms, is important. For the bigger firms, of course, they will learn as they go along. But I would recommend really going deep into a domain and absolutely reimagining it and breaking up into these tasks. A survey that we did, admittedly it's global in the legal profession, not Singapore-based. 81% of legal professionals said that they expect their industry to be fundamentally changed. And just to give you another statistic, tech VCs have put in about $5 billion in the legal industry as of 2025. This is not counting what valuation their investments happen, which is much bigger,
Yes.
but just the scale of the
Yes.
investment and disruption that is happening. So in my mind, there's a lot of opportunity to take away the mundane tasks, as I said, querying, answering, inciting, summarization, drafting, deviations, terms, all of that. But there's also some fundamental questions called pyramid, training, reimagining workflows, billing, speed, and a lot of other questions that need to get done as well.
So actually getting the technology itself, or the fastest or the quickest or the most powerful device is just one part, maybe a small part
A
of the
small
equation.
part.
It's really about how it's assimilated into the firm's practice, workflow, front end and back end. It's also about how one might be prepared to train to use the AI, because there's really no point having the best product in the market when you don't know how to use it.
Oh, absolutely. I can't emphasize this because, the number of times I get tired when people say, I have tool XYZ and I've rolled it out to all my employees. And I'm like, yeah, good.
Can I just jump in and also, sorry to
Sure.
interject, about how our internal learnings are in Google as well? Because we, as I mentioned, we have a lot of tools. And even for us internally, we're overwhelmed. There's always a new iteration. There's a new tool. You can do this, do that. And actually, in the whole of 2025, we spent the whole of 2025 encouraging our individual lawyers within Google, and all Googlers, in fact, to start using AI. Right? We allow time for and space for individual exploration, because the whole idea is about getting them comfortable with the tools, and to get them used to using it in their workflow. Because the reality is that the adoption curve is real. Many lawyers struggle with how to start using AI. So you need to give them that space to explore on their own, space and time, right? And you will find over time that for the same tool, you will have 10 lawyers finding 10 different ways to use it. And when that happens, you encourage them to come together as teams to share how they're using the tool. Because each tool has so many different ways of deployment that, it's always good to learn from someone, right? And that's why my message to the audience in this group, right, is that you really need to start investing in yourself, in your teams, to start to get them using it, right? Just play around with the tools. Try as many as you want out there, and you will land on something that you're comfortable with. And I can tell you that for one tool, I may like it for something, but somebody in my team actually, for the same kind of work, prefers another tool. But it's entirely up to them, because different tools speaks to different people. And I think that's important. It's about exploration and experimentation.
Well, we have many of the vendors at the back of this room now. At the end of this session, you can go and try it out. They'll happily show you the tools. And I think it's about drafting, it's about research, document organizing, paginating your documents as well. They can do it for free. And also a whole range of back-end firm management, timekeeping, billing, accounting, and a whole range of this. And I think the idea here now really is to find a way in which you can generate reliably a workflow that is able to remove from your daily affairs the mundane and the routine, and it frees you up to deal with the higher value work. And I think if we can look at AI that way, it allows us to level up our adoption. But on that note, I thought I'll pick up on one of the questions that came through the pigeonhole, which is about the way in which AI might widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I thought I'll just pose the question to any one of you. The question goes like this. AI has the potential to democratize legal knowledge, but it could also widen the gap between firms with advanced tools and those without. How do you see AI affecting senior solo practitioners?
I briefly mentioned that scale is definitely an advantage that we see in this AI world. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the smaller firms are completely out of the game. You do have moats as in defense. You have your personal touch, you have your clientele, you have trust. But you need to perhaps figure out how to work with other firms, share, do more sharing, and figure out how to reimagine and bring some of those tooling, because the tools are just one part, but you have to reimagine how to approach, the workflow that you're doing. And so in my mind, it needs a little bit of a more of an ecosystem approach versus just figuring it out yourself. But I don't see that as an impossibility. But yes, if you have a scale play, you can do it on your own. If you're not a scale play and you're a mid-size play, working the ecosystem and really then leveraging your strengths is the other way to go.
But I suppose it's also a function of the tools at this point in time that we are talking about, not yet having been developed at a level where there is scale and where you can therefore level down the pricing for adoption. So we are still at that stage where it's still being experimented upon. There is not much adoption of certain types of products. So the scale therefore means that the cost of each product might still be high. Would you agree?
So my view is that at this point, the question is more around how do clients change their ask of you as legal professionals, speed, billing, etc. I actually think the tooling is not the constraint, whether you're a big firm or a mid-size or a small firm. When I said scale as a large firm, you can innovate by yourself and reimagine all the workflows, try, experiment, and do stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a small solo type firm, you need to work the ecosystem. It's hard to do it all on your own, is what I was trying to get to. But I don't think it's the cost of the technology. It's more how you leverage, learn, and get up that learning curve.
Understand.
If I can respond to that, and I don't mean this as a sales pitch, but I do recognize that there are so many tools out there that it can get confusing, right? So many providers of these tools, but in Google, because we have a full stack approach to innovations, so when you're on Google Workspace, you just have access to all the myriad of tools that we have, and I think for the sole proprietor, that may be a solution.
Just to add to that, there's a Google booth at the back of this room as well. See, I'm helping you.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, Moon, you had a comment?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of companies, not just legal firms, I think struggle with ROI when they bring in a new technology like AI. And we do too. I mean, we've been investing in AI. We say, what's the ROI? I've come to a conclusion that you will not get the ROI if you are just doing it as an additional stuff.
Yep.
You have to stop doing what you used to do. When you reimagine the whole process of the workflow, you cannot run it in parallel. When you're running it in parallel, you have double costs. So the only time you will see the ROI when you say, this new way of working with AI is better than my existing, and I'm going to stop doing what I used to do, and I fully embrace it. That's where you'll get the huge ROI coming in. So then what it means is you have to be all in.
Yeah.
You cannot be doing pilots, and you got more pilots than SIA. That you need to really get in and do the work and stop doing the old ways.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I think it's really about making sure that once you find the right solution, I think you've got to get everyone behind it. And I think if truth be told, and again, some of you might be able to speak to this, I think that is also one of the resistors to adoption, because there will be different perspectives. In a given law firm, there'll be different perspectives. Oh, is it too expensive? Should we not invest in this? Or is it too difficult to learn? Or is it something that might help me in my particular area of practice or not? And I think I'll go back to Kamal's point. I mean, the further you're away from people, perhaps then it might become more relevant in the way in which you work. But if you're closer to people, in the practices that you have, say for example in family or maybe in the criminal justice system, you might say that your own personal touch is a bit more important. So there's a whole range of different reasons why there might be resistance to a uniform adoption. But I think Moon's point is valid, that if you do want to get involved, you do want to get on board, then I think it does make sense for the entire system in the firm to change and to move into one direction.
But I just wanted to emphasize Moon's point. You have to start with reimagining whatever workflow you're dealing with. Then AI is an enabler to where you see those frictions or those 5, 10 elements I talked about, not the other way around.
Or the other way around.
And then point 2 is, of course, you need to, as Esther said, you have to allow, but that's a parallel track. You have to allow people to experiment, learn, etc. But just by having 1,000 flowers bloom and expecting everything to change does not happen. You have to reimagine the workflow.
Understand. Okay, I'm going to invite questions from the floor in a moment, but so that you can prepare. But before that, I'll just cover one other area, and that's in the area of training. And maybe I'll start with you, Kamal, because when I was a young lawyer, in as much as the outcome of that research project or the legal memo that I was drafting was important, to me, the process was perhaps more important as a young lawyer, because I learned how to make mistakes, I learned where the boundaries were, I knew what was right, what was wrong, and that process enabled me to learn, and I felt that I developed as a result of that. But when you interpose AI and legal tools into the framework today, you might find that you lose the opportunity to go through the process. You arrive at the right answer each time, and with a very good AI tool every time. So what's your take on what we might do to legal training, not just as in law school, but on a continuing basis in practice? And what is the impact that AI will have on the way in which you hone skills, which, as I said in my speech earlier, which you can learn while watching, while understanding, while observing for yourself?
Well, I think, Minister, there are two areas that I can touch on in this. The first is talking about the workflow of training and what skills you take from there. And I think the second part is really addressing this idea that AI is always going to get things right. So I think on this first premise first, on one hand, it's quite tempting, I think, that we can analogize the legal profession to something like, as we mentioned, the aviation industry, like pilots training. And I think that this analogy seems quite befitting, because if you think about it, yes, pilots do have some level of automation within the systems and can land a plane and can take off and whatever, but everyone still goes to flying school. Everyone still has to learn how to use a joystick. Everyone still has to learn how to use the manual controls if things go wrong. And then now with new technology coming along, they learn how to use semi-automated controls. I'm not a pilot myself, in case it wasn't obvious. But there are some elements of a blended approach to automation, while at the same time knowing that you have the manual skills in your back pocket. And then once you actually go into practice and the practice of flying, and you do your flights day in, day out, then your automation takes over, but you still have that skills. So if you apply it to the legal profession, and this is coming from someone who has still gone through very traditional legal internships, I still drafted a lot of legal memos. I had to do a lot of research on your very traditional LawNet before LawNet had its new fancy tools that introduced AI. So I guess if you look at the different tiers at which legal training can take place, there's a fully manual approach that I think firms can take on, which is everything is still done the traditional way. You draft your memo the same way that you would. You research, you click on LawNet as you would. You go through the search terms as you typically would. But then there's a hybrid approach where, yes, you know how to draft, and the drafting is still done by you, but then AI is done as a supplementary tool. Let's say if you need to draft out 4 different ways to frame a certain argument, or 4 different ways to phrase a certain part of your pleadings, then that becomes a semi-auto approach. Then the thing is, and if you want to talk about increasing the productivity, which is what AI is designed to do, which is to make lives easier for a lot of us practitioners, then the fully automated approach happens once the training is done. So once you're trained, once you know how the ins and outs of the trade works, then when you're doing the regular cases, then AI can probably have a bigger function. But then again, I think that a key part of training, and I think a lot of the seniors would agree, and you all would probably have interns and junior practitioners around you, the raw skill of knowing how to write, of knowing how to research is something that I've benefited quite a lot from my supervisors, who took the time to tell me, this is how you write pleadings, this is how you research specific issues, and this is how you speak to a client. These are things that you will learn on a manual scale. AI can be used to supplement, but then in the end, once you get into practice, I think it's separate. Because the training that you get will give you the raw skills if things go wrong. Then once you get into practice, then automation can be done within reason. But to that second premise about whether AI is always going to get things right, just a funny thing recently was I was writing a research paper for an assignment 3 days ago with AI allowed, in case there's any members of faculty in the audience. But at the same time, I was doing something very mechanical, asking it to write out citations for 5 sources, just 5. It gave me my citations perfectly, gave me the URLs perfectly fine. But then it got all the years messed up. And I'm thinking like, if it can't do something as mechanical as citations, am I really going to trust it to write pleadings? Am I really going to trust it to do everything that you would want a practice trainee to do? Albeit, I don't think you would trust a practice trainee to do everything that you want in a law firm. Surely there's a lot to learn. But I think AI isn't at that point yet where it's completely eclipsing us in all we can do. So to bring these two things together, to really dovetail it, I think that you do need to have a manual approach to training where people are still taught what needs to be done. But then, because AI exists, you need to teach them how to integrate AI into this workflow, but you need the bedrock of the manual skills. Because in the end, as any pilot will tell you, if autopilot fails, someone still needs to grab the joystick.
Well, I won't ask you which AI you use for your assignment.
Please
worry.
don't.
But maybe I pose a different question to Esther, who's seen it from the perspective of being in practice, having come through as a young associate and into partnership. And there's a question that came on the pigeonhole, and it says this: how will young lawyers gain judgment and learn to give strategic legal advice if AI is taking away the junior work and cutting short the apprenticeship model? How do you think you might tell a younger Esther, you're still young, but a younger Esther, many years ago, about this question, about how you would learn on the job if AI is providing all the solutions for you?
I have to say, the younger Esther was also very good with the photocopying machine.
Photocopy machine.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in the photocopy machine, and I do a lot of binding. So I picked up those skills as well. But on a serious note to the question, right, is, you know, as I mentioned, AI is not meant to replace you. It's supposed to save you time, right? And as Minister, you mentioned in your speech earlier, there's a high number of percentage of people that says that they don't want to work long hours. So AI is supposed to save you time in those aspects where you spend researching and drafting. And, but the time saved is not for you to do nothing, right? The time saved is for you to start thinking harder. So it's not meant for you to work less, but for you to think more, right? And as to how you're going to practice critical thinking, I think one of the ways, right, and there's many ways that people can try, but one of the ways I would suggest is for a senior mentor in the firm to say, hey, why don't you use AI and prompt the machine to give you 5 scenarios on how you can resolve this complex case that the client has presented. And then choose one scenario in which you explain why you would recommend to your client. Right? So this is one of the ways that you can train and foster critical thinking. And of course, you know, constant observation of the senior partners around you and of your peers, what to do and what not to do. Sitting in court, as Minister said, this is how you observe people and learn from them and learn from the very best. So critical thinking is still there, but now you get more time to do it.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question of the panel? I can't see, but anyone? Is there one? I see a hand or two up there at the back.
Can't see.
I can't quite see you, but please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. This is Edmund. Unfortunately, I will ask a question.
Where are you?
Here.
Oh, here. Okay.
I'm sad to see there's no presently practicing lawyer on the panel. So this, I think, is a bit of an interesting question to ask. We have so many in today's Singapore legal industry doing routine, repetitive work like standard contract drafting, tenancy agreements, loan agreements, basic money claims, debt recovery, conveyancing, simple will drafting, corporate secretarial services. We have many in today's legal industry doing that. What practical advice would the panel give the 6,000 lawyers in our legal industry so that many of us can rapidly pivot from doing routine repetitive work that AI can do and will do increasingly well to doing better income generating work that benefits from the human element as opposed to the speed of AI? How exactly do we make that change? Please don't just tell me buy AI. That doesn't help. What practical changes can we make to the way we work and the way we think?
Ashley, you want to make a stab at that?
So look, if there was a silver bullet, I would have given you the answer. Alas, there is no silver bullet like that that can answer that question. If there was, none of you would have shown up here, I bet you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's what Moon said, it's what I said. Take a workflow, take contract drafting, management, life cycle, take that entire workflow, break it up into steps. What is AI going to assist you? What is it going to give you as insights and querying? What is it going to draft? What is it going to do for deviations? Break it up. See then, how do you then make sure that whatever tooling you use has the guardrails, has everything that allows you to trust it, and then make sure that people actually leverage it and use it. And just throwing it across the transom and saying, let's make it work, will not happen. So to me, that needs to happen. Now, does that mean that does that answer your question on what happens to the pyramid and the billing practices? No, that I think is an open question. All professional service firms are dealing with it, but that's a different discussion altogether. But in terms of driving the change, I would thoroughly recommend that, and I would pick 2-3 areas, not like 25 things to do, because then nothing gets done.
And I think once you've done that, the way I would look at it, if you're a firm trying to make more money, then you say, I'm going to change the way I bill my clients. Because once I get the efficiency, I get the productivity, I know everyone else is charging it this way, I'm going to change the way I'm going to charge. Mm-hmm. And that's the disruption, and that's going to set you aside from the rest. Because understanding your own flow, reimagining your own flow, knowing your new cost structure, coming up with a new pricing model will disrupt your competitors.
Actually, I really like that, because 30 years ago, when I was also sitting and feeding the overhead projector and writing slides, not really a paginator, we used to do professional services by the hour. Today, 70% of our business is outcome-based, if that, so it's a completely different way of reimagining the model as well. So I think we will go through a period of evolution, but there is plenty of opportunity and light at the end of the tunnel.
So there was a question to say, will in the future or near future, there will be AI lawyers giving advice to AI clients. The first thing is, if you have changed your whole process, you can replicate the individual lawyer say, I'm extending myself, I can work 24/7, I'm the AI lawyer. You clone yourself and you offer services 24/7, you can clock 24/7 or bill. So that's reimagining your work. So I think it's really about how you reimagine your work, and the disruption will come from within. The question is, how willing are you to push the envelope and say, is this possible?
Is there another question? Yes, I see a hand up.
I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you for convening this wonderful event. My name is Hui Ling. I'm at Bethel Chambers, so private practice. I unfortunately do not do litigation, would love to have done it, but I'm a corporate lawyer. My specialty is in aviation. Now, for us, because we are a young law firm, we have had to innovate by necessity, not by choice. I had a lot of learnings from my time as an ex-Big Law partner. And what we have wanted to take out of this session, meeting everyone here, has been really enlightening, because it not just addresses our needs now, but also has addressed reimagining our future as a legal profession. So when we reimagine this, and this is something we have put out into the market, can we be a forward-deployed lawyer? Can we be excluding the defense elements, like a legal palantir? Because in a lot of international firms, there are software deployed into clients to do things like legal expenses analytics, right? To do things like going into a client and really not just dealing with our internal workflows, but clients' workflows. How do we go into that next level is what really excites us and is what we're trying to push the envelope today on. Now, the question is this allowed? Right? Because there are some boundaries as legal professionals in doing this, but doing that actually opens the door to a lot of what was said today about pricing, about relevance to the customer, and that, I mean, I'm a passionate practitioner, so that for me keeps me alive, keeps me passionate about what I can bring into the world. Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts.
I think you stumped all of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really understood the question, to be honest. But if you're asking about pricing and all that, and I think it's related to the earlier question, the concept of a one-stop shop law firm, as we're observing it from the work that we're doing, is going away, right? The legal sector industry as a whole is going into a new normal. And if you're going to be so used to billable hour, and I can imagine, because I used to be from practice, that's what it's all about, that will go away, right? So you need to stop thinking about how can I maintain this billable hour to be sustainable in the future. But I think you need to, instead of billable hour, you need to start thinking about billable impact, or what we call value-based pricing, and we are already seeing some firms moving towards that. And as we kept talking about repeatedly, right, is that AI won't replace the lawyer, but the lawyer using AI will replace the one who don't. So you really need to start getting on the train and making sure that happens. I'm not really sure I answered your question.
Sure. I'd like to give some relevance, maybe some examples that might refine what we're talking about. So one of the products that we pushed out to a client was a dashboard to look at regulatory compliance requirements for running an airport. Okay, I'm an aviation lawyer, so we do airports. Okay, and there are actually a lot of rules: air safety, construction, labor laws, right? Even ground handling would be something that is relevant to them. So when we deployed this, it was a program. We almost charged as if we were developers. Yeah, so definitely in terms of pricing, we have there are ways to do that. But moving forward, and this is what I'm passionate and hope to have more people along with the journey, is whether we can move past just being lawyers, but also lawyer plus developer, because vibe coding and no-code software development is actually very possible.
I think if you wanted to develop a software that allows you to sync with your client's needs, to be, I think in your words, forward deployed, understanding their business needs, understanding the way in which they function, they operate, and some of their priorities, because there might be a range of different options that they might have in trying to overcome a problem. I think all that is fine, because all that helps you in your legal advice to your client, and you can only give the legal advice if you more deeply understand their own priorities, their own workflows, and perhaps even their business and non-business considerations. So I think that's fine, and I would like to see that happen. But the question really that is, how much of this can you do now with or without technology? Can you find products that allow you to customize it to your needs in the aviation sector? I think those are all separate questions, but the bottom line is that I would encourage you to be very much in tune and very much take into account the needs of your specific client rather than to try and give generalized advice.
Thanks.
Is there another one behind you? I can't quite see. No.
Hi, I think I've got the mic.
Okay, where are you?
In front.
I'm here.
I
Hello,
see.
Minister.
Hi.
Good to see you. Hi, and hi, everyone. Very insightful panel. So my name is Lynette Uy. I work with, I'm a founder of Better Wiser, an AI consulting firm that helps law firms and legal teams with change management. So all this is music to my ears. I think it aligns a lot with what we're thinking. And I think the question for you is, so I've been speaking to so many GCs and managing partners in the last few months, right, about their pain points, about the problems they're trying to solve. And the thing I keep hearing is, look, Lynette, I obviously know AI is something I have to do, but frankly, I'm a bit lost. I'm lost not because I'm short on intelligence, not because I'm short on a smart team. I'm lost because there's an overwhelm of information. First of all, everything's moving so quickly because AI is moving so quickly. Second, the information about AI, because of AI, generative AI, is overwhelming and there's so much noise. Right, so I think the question I have for you, because all of you have this relevant experience, is what is the best use of a leader's time? The leaders are saying, I need to get on Claude Code and start coding. I need to talk to vendors. I need to talk to my team. I need to get people on board. I need to hire a legal ops person to help me. What, in your view, is the best and most valuable use of a leader's time in a change management project? Thank you.
I'd like to invite Vaishri to answer that.
I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. As I said, it's the 10, 20, 70. 10 is the technology, 20 is all the algorithms, 70 is the change management. But you need to know where you're driving towards, meaning what's your destination. And therefore, you need to know in whatever area you are in, M&A, IP, corporate, whatever, litigation, what are the biggest areas you're going to disrupt using AI or leverage using AI? You have to have clarity on that. Because if you don't know where you're headed, there's no point heading there. So that's point one. Once you know where you're heading, you go deep, you completely transform that workflow, and then you bring in the people and the tooling to enable it. But if you as a leader do not know that, and you are not trying to visibly transform that entire domain, I think the rest is, quite frankly, not worth it.
Okay, I see one person up. Yeah, I'll just take one last question, two last questions. If you ask them both together, we'll get them to answer because some of the panelists have a time commitment at the end of the session. So I hope that we can just take the last two questions, and I invite both of you to ask them together, one after the other, rather.
Okay. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm an in-house counsel, but I also empathize. I think there are studies that shows that are probably very low improvement in terms of productivity when it comes to adopting AI tools. But I think when it comes to the legal profession, and I empathize with my little brothers from the legal profession in that their career is very much rooted in accountability. And if there are lack of transparency when it comes to AI tool and the fact that AI tool is prone to making errors, how does one square with the fact that lawyers at the end of the day have to be accountable for the output and yet to use the AI tool to improve their productivity? Perhaps maybe we have to look at something that we can help to promote the reliability and transparency of AI tool. Then I think the market will follow.
The other gentleman over there.
I'm Jamison, a law student at SMU. So I built several legal tools for some law firms, and I was wondering how the ministry plans to reduce friction when onboarding lawyers, besides monetary support.
Did you say you built several legal tools for law firms?
Yeah, we have traction, but I don't want to sound like a sales pitch, so I just want to ask, how do you plan to reduce friction when onboarding lawyers, besides monetary support?
Well, I mean, the short point is that we look at money as only one factor.
Correct.
And as I explained earlier, I think a lot of it really comes in terms of hand-holding from end to end, supporting them through that change management, looking at internal process. And as I explained earlier, no two firms are the same, whether you're a big firm, small firm, firms that is practiced a lot in transactional work or a lot in disputes work, the profile will be quite different, and therefore the needs of the AI will be quite different. So what we would like to do is to have consultants together with us and the partners of the firm sit down, analyze the profile of the firm and understand what are the specific AI needs that this firm might benefit from. And I like to take Vaishli's point as well in not trying to boil the ocean and have too many things. Just try and focus on a couple of changes that will make the delta stronger and start with that. So that's the focus of LIFT, which we will be introducing in a couple of, in the coming days. But maybe someone can take the first point. Moon, you want to have a stab at it?
Yeah, I think if you're very concerned about accuracy of AI, I think it's advancing really rapidly. It's how you ground your data, how you train your data, how you do the inference. So if you fit it with the right data, it will be more and more accurate, it will be better and better. And you know, from 6 months ago versus now versus 2 years ago when first ChatGPT come, it has made huge improvement. So that shouldn't be a reason or excuse for not doing it. I mean, it's not just about the legal profession. Every profession have got liabilities, have got accountability, doctors as well. But why are they using it? In fact, I'll give you another example of a medical. The reason why I'm using medical is because the brightest and the smartest goes into medicine and legal. So if I say anything else, you all don't believe me. Today, if you go to do again a scan, the accuracy of someone, the radiographer reading your scan by a human, first time right, getting it is 70%. If you send it to an AI to read it, it's probably 80%. So it's a huge improvement. So AI is better than a human. But when you put a human to use AI, where do you think the results will be?
95%.
We all think so, but the reality is it's actually better than a human, but poorer than the AI. So what it means, human is slowing down the AI, not the other way around.
Oh dear.
So then the question is, allow the AI to do its work, human come back to validate it. As opposed to you do the work and then you try to use AI to validate.
I also think you need to put the context in, the guardrails in. You have to write all those things into what you're using. You can't just assume it will do it all on its own. We can take it offline and discuss it. But there are ways around it, and we tell our associates, you are responsible for the output, whether it is yours or it's the AI's. You are in the end responsible for it. And once you make that clear, I think the rest then follows.
Yes. Okay, there's a hand up there. Okay. One last question. Keep it short.
Hi, Minister. I'm speaking up because I am a practicing lawyer still. To answer the first question that Edwin brought up, I think all the cases that you talked about, all the kinds of work that you talked about, frankly, are gone. And that's validated, I think, by what Esther said. That's all gone. Legal practice, as we see it in the future, is going to be completely different. It is going to be largely strategic, empathy, trust-based, rather than document product-based. That's just the bottom line. We got to get our act together and get there. Now, the question is this, and I put this question in Pigeonhole, it hasn't been answered. My question to the minister is this: how are we going to change the education system, particularly in universities, to prepare our young lawyers to be commercial, empathetic, and strategic from day one? Because that's the big question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It won't happen from day one. Okay, it's not going to be possible from day one. But I think that law school education will have to graft onto it the use of AI. I think we can't ignore it. But at the same time, I believe that the traditional learning mechanisms, the traditional modules, the way in which they should still be retained. Because there's nothing like understanding the law from its first principles and understanding how they apply in different scenarios. Ethics will be a very strong component of that module. Likewise, the practicality of appearing in court, appearing in moods, appearing in sessions where you conduct practical sessions, oral arguments. All of that, I think, ought to still be the basic modules in law school, because those things you can't teach outside. You can't teach using the technology module, you can't teach using AI, and those are the areas which, Steph, you mentioned, are areas which AIs or robots will not replace the humans in. And so I think you're right, we've got to get that act together, we've got to look at what we can use AI for and what we can't, and law schools will have to focus on those areas that can't. And I think it's in many ways, I think it's beyond the law schools as well. So you've got to go back into how we mentor young students and young lawyers when they're in practice. The learning doesn't stop when you finish and graduate out of law school. The learning continues into your time as a young associate. The way in which you, as a senior lawyer, mentor a young lawyer. How do you behave in court? How do you respond to a judge's questions? What is your body language like when you speak to opposing counsel? All of these things are things which you cannot teach outside of the experience itself. And I believe that no AI will be able to replicate those elements of being a lawyer. So there are many, many things that we need to do, but I think I'm a bit old-fashioned and old school, but we need to go back to fundamentals. Law school must still retain something that is very traditional, pen and paper, even though we have AI. They must teach AI, but we must still go back to the very traditional areas. Okay, I think on that note, I'm going to call this to an end, because we have some of our panelists have spent a lot more time than they had originally thought. I want to take the opportunity to thank them very much, because they've lent us a perspective. I was going to say they have lent us a perspective that is quite different, as I try to tell them to do, to give us an outside-in perspective. Just now, I think someone said, why is there no lawyer on this panel? Because we all agreed that if we put a lawyer on this panel, we might not have the kind of conversations about the legal practice that we might have had. So I thank you all very much for spending time with us. We are now going to, I think, break off into networking sessions. So I hope that you will find you found this panel useful, but that you'll continue the conversations over a drink, over coffee, and see you at the booths at the back as well. Get your hands wet, understand how it works, and also pick up some of the free trials that the vendors here are offering, so that you can deepen your own experience in AI and legal tech. Thank you.